I use the Trojan horse analogy. Might as well go back to the original story. Okay, so Greece knew that it would never defeat Troy militarily. As I believe China knows that it will not, at least for the foreseeable future, defeat the United States militarily. But what Greece knew is that if they needed to defeat Troy, they had to give them the gift that Troy could not resist, the sweet gift of that Trojan horse. This dates back to the original stories, okay, Paris and onwards. I won't go there today. But they knew Troy could not resist that gift, so they gave them the Trojan horse. They could not scale the military walls of Troy, but they got the Trojan horse in through the front door, and then inside rested the soldiers that burned Troy from within. That's the way the story went. China realized that the sweet Trojan horse, the sweet gift that we could not resist, was the gift, or at least the appearance, of global capitalism itself. Thank you, Henry Kissinger, actually. We thought we were on the winning side of that trade. Turns out they had the last laugh in the end, because what they realized was that we just couldn't relieve our addiction to what we saw as green pieces of paper and told ourselves the myth that somehow we were going to change them rather than the other way around. And so what they did was they said that, okay, we're going to play a game here. Actually, there's a funny parallel here. Larry Fink, who's a leading proponent of stakeholder capitalism and ESG in the US, says in the US, he said it as recently as 2020, that businesses have to earn their social license to operate. There's a really funny parallel, and I'm a big believer that language teaches us something about reality. The Chinese Communist Party actually uses that language. In China, they say you have to earn your social license to do business in China. But the way you earn your social license to do business in China is by doing what the CCP tells you to do. Conditions include not criticizing the CCP. Bonus factors include criticizing the United States. Conditions include not applying emissions caps in China. Conditions include applying those emissions caps in places like the United States. But even more problematically, and you alluded to this, handing over your data. Your data in just China? No. Wall Street Journal reporting on this a couple of years ago. I detailed it in more detail in my book, Woke Inc., my first book. Airbnb, as a condition for doing business in China, hands over the data of its US users. Hey, anyone used Airbnb by a show of hands in the audience? Good number of you. Okay, the private messages that a host and a guest send to each other are included, not to mention the geolocational data, are included in the data that Airbnb, a Silicon Valley darling that posts a nice little black square on its Instagram account after the George Floyd tragedy, signaling its social virtue, compensating its executives, not just based on profit goals, but on ESG goals. All these things are true about Airbnb. That is the company that, without telling its US customers, is handing over US user data to the CCP as a condition for doing business there. Now, that is the same game that actually TikTok is playing, but we're focused on TikTok because it's owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, but it turns out they're playing the same game with US companies as well. And then it's one step worse. There are even laws in China that increasingly prevent the companies that are doing it from disclosing it in the United States because it was designed for us not to actually see. Okay, and if you have any doubt about it, listen to what Xi Jinping says on a given day. When Xi Jinping is pressed by the UN, as he was in the last couple of years, about the Uyghur human rights crisis in Xinjiang, the first thing he says is actually Black Lives Matter shows that the United States is no better, which would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that the Airbnbs of the world and the Disneys of the world lend credibility to that claim because they're relentlessly criticizing the thing that Xi Jinping is criticizing, alleged systemic racism in the United States, without actually saying a peep about those human rights atrocities abroad.